Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UPNradio.com.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Rebel Hearts with Kristie Reeves. I'm so excited you're joining us today. And we started a series of interviews with people who are experts in their field, working with highly sensitive children, empathic children and adults. And, you know, being a highly sensitive child or adult now myself, it's been such a topic that's dear to my heart. And I see so many people in my circle of friends or people I come across who have this high sensitivity and who don't really know how to handle it and what to do with it. And I feel we just really need to get these tools and get information about what high sensitivity is, what empathic abilities are, in order to really become empowered and, you know, instead of feeling weakened by that sensitivity, actually turn it around so we can use it and stay sensitive in a sometimes not so sensitive world. So I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. And I have to tell you, I started reading her book and I was actually getting really emotional because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me, or this was me. And I went through this myself. So I'm really, really honored to have her on today's show. So let me tell you a little bit about her. We're welcoming today Dr. Niki Elliott, and she is a clinical professor, author, speaker, and expert in the field of consciousness development and vibrational healing. She earned a BA at UC Berkeley, an MA at Teachers College, Columbia University, and a PhD in education from UCLA. She has trained for more than 15 years in various holistic healing modalities. Niki is also the founder of the Innerlight Sanctuary, a virtual village for empathic and intuitive people. Niki has written 2 books, The Intuitive Mother and I Feel Your Pain, a 7-step survival guide for empath, intuitives, and highly sensitive people. Niki founded the Innerlight Method, a groundbreaking energy healing modality that helps highly sensitive people develop healthy energetic boundaries and restore emotional and physical balance. Presently, Dr. Niki serves as a clinical professor of education and the co-director of the Center for Neurodiversity, Learning and Wellness at the University of La Verne. I am so excited she's joining us today. Welcome, Dr. Niki Elliott.
Thank you, Kristie. When I listened to that bio, I said, did I do all that?
That is a shortened bio. What your assistant sent me over. I am so happy that you're here today. And I've been looking at your work because actually, we have to give a big thanks to Keith Anthony Blanchard, who said to me, you need to have Niki Elliott on your show. She's incredible. She's amazing. She helped our family. And she's just a wonderful human being. So call her up, email her, and get her on your show. Thank you, Keith.
He's awesome.
He's amazing.
Been a real blessing to me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. I cannot resist any opportunity to spread the word and to help families, educators, mental health, wellness providers understand more about this population of children. So thank you for the important work you do to create media outlets for it. So
thank you.
Awesome.
And I read some of your stories because you had a big spiritual awakening. When was it? About 15 years ago or so?
This would be 16 years.
16 years ago.
Yes,
okay.
now 16.
And you went through a whole bunch of challenges and difficulties and felt really, really lost. Tell us a little bit about what happened and some of the challenges that you were facing, because I feel like so many people are going through that at the moment.
Yes, thank you. So when I look back in retrospect, I realized I was always intuitive as a child, but I just thought there were things that anyone could do, you know. But it wasn't until I had a traumatic childbirth experience in the year 2001. I went into premature labor and gave birth to a stillborn baby girl. And as you know, childbirth is one major trigger for people kind of blowing open into their intuitive capacity. And traumatic life shock is another way. So for me, that was a double whammy.
Oh my goodness.
Of having experienced childbirth on top of the traumatic loss. And so from that experience, within about 2 weeks after that experience, I began having a tremendous increase in my intuitive and empathic capacities. of feeling other people's physical pains and in my body and thinking they were mine, because I never previously had an experience of sitting next to someone and then feeling their headache, or being at a party and feeling someone's breast cancer or breast pains. And simultaneously hearing intuitive, auditory, empathic, and intuitive messages.
Wow.
And it started off being when I was in the presence of pregnant women, I could hear, "Could you please tell my mommy I need?" And I'm like, okay, I need grief counseling. I need psychotherapy.
Oh my goodness.
And so as you can imagine, being someone who's classically trained, academic, you know, it was very frightening for me to feel that this was a kind of a result of my grief. And I really didn't know, do I need to go see mental health, or do I need grief counseling? And I did get grief counseling. And fortunately, my midwives and the grief counselor that I selected were both very immersed in the world of energy healing and holistic wellness. And they knew me and they knew my background. And so because of them, thankfully, they redirected me toward energy healing modalities and to work with people who were trained in metaphysics that were able to help me understand this as a breakthrough to a spiritual awakening rather than a breakdown to mental illness. And it is a very fine line, not to diminish at all for people who do hear voices or things that are more on the schizophrenic end. But for me, it was a tremendous spiritual awakening that led to a complete transformation of my life path and purpose. So.
And do you feel, being an intuitive child, I feel like every single person has intuitive gifts. Some are more developed as a child and some are less, I feel.
Absolutely.
But having had these intuitive abilities as a child and not even knowing what they were, or not having that support system around that could tell you what is going on with you, that you kind of in a way shut them down, and then it just overnight just pop that lid off, so to say.
Absolutely. And so for me, as I look at it from a professional perspective, I do see the children that I support on a significant continuum, adults as well. And I absolutely agree with you that we are all intuitive, but not everyone is intuitive and open to the point where they are so energetically overloaded that it makes it difficult to function or to feel well physically. And so as a child, I was able to function, be a straight A student, play, enjoy life. Nothing like the intuitive overload that I see in many children who come to me now that are not able to go out of the home, enjoy Disneyland, perform in classrooms. So it was never at that extent until I had the spiritual break open, right? So it gave me a tremendous amount of compassion for children and adults who are so overloaded with their spiritual and intuitive capacity that they cannot function in a grounded way in their physical experience. So.
And for you, when did you realize that the pains you were feeling was not even yours? That you were actually picking up the pains of the people around you?
So it was through the Reiki practitioner that my midwife sent me to, and to the intuitive grief counselor that I worked with. They helped me see that I was empathic and also auditory intuitive as well. And so one of the very first things they both taught me was that the next time you feel a pain in your body, before you run to the doctor and say, "Oh, I'm dying of stomach aches or headaches, and please check me," because there's a little bit of concern about hypochondria on that end. But they said, stop and intuitively ask yourself, is this my pain? And see the response you get. And if you get no, it's not your pain, then ask, well, whose is it? And so it started off as kind of like just this kind of experimental process, because I had no background in it. So the next time I'm out in public and I felt someone's pain, I stop and get really quiet and ask, is this my pain? And if I heard no, then I say, whose is it? And originally, I didn't always hear, if I didn't know the name of the person, it would just say, walk around. And so I would walk around a room or walk around at a party, and the pain would actually intensify when I got in the presence of the person. And so at that time, all those years ago, I would then hear a message. And if I would share the message with the person, then the pain would leave my body.
Wow.
And so throughout all these years, my journey has been to learn how to not feel that, right? Because most of us who are empathic and intuitive, we walk around at a level 10, which in my work would be 100% open. And we don't know any other way to be. So we end up becoming agoraphobic or self-isolating or just constantly overwhelmed, because we don't know that we don't have to just always be open at a level 10. And so my journey now has been to say, okay, today right here with you, I want to dial that down to about a 2 or a 3, right? I want to intuit true and present danger, but I don't want to feel your stomach ache or your headache or sense the emotional pain you have if something disturbing happened to you last night, right? And so a big part of the journey is to learn when to dial it up. If I'm in a session working with a client, I want to be at a level 10 to feel, hear, totally connect. But when I'm done with that, I want to close that to a level that's manageable for what I'm engaged in at that time. So that was the journey for me of learning how to use consciousness, the direction of consciousness, to decide how open I want it to be. And that's one of the major first tools that I teach the empathic and intuitive people that I work with.
I wish I would have known you when I moved to Los Angeles. Honestly.
Very overwhelming.
Honestly. And I lived in Vancouver, Canada. And I'm from an 800 people village in Germany. So everything it's that village is like Pleasantville. Like everything is really sweet and nice and nature, and people know one another and care for one another. And even living in Vancouver, even though it's a 1.8 million people city, it still has that small town, or at that time when I lived there, that small town mentality. And then I came down here and I was subletting a place from one of my dance buddies from Vancouver, and he lived right in the middle of Hollywood, of Cahuenga and Franklin and Rebel Hearts. If you don't know where that is, it's right in the heart of Hollywood where all the super crazy energy is. And I moved there before the Hollywood Highland Mall opened, so it was even crazier at that time. And I was in such a state of shock because for me, I didn't have that big explosion or lid popping like you did, but it would come in these stages where I would have like an opening of my intuitive skills, like 2-3 notches and another notch and another notch. And I had this probably 6 months before I moved to LA, and I did not want to leave my house because it was so overwhelming to be in that energy.
I understand.
And then I started school in Hollywood, which was right off Hollywood Highland, so not any better. And every moment I had, I would go to the beach to Santa Monica or up to Malibu, just like to be in nature and put my feet into the salt water, because I didn't know how to handle the intensity of that energy in Hollywood. I didn't know how to dial it down, like you said.
And I moved out to Pasadena, and we have bears and bunny rabbits and deer, and and it is important for us as empaths to understand what our body needs, but it's so critical, especially in these times, to not check out. And that is my biggest message currently to those of us who are empathic and intuitive and highly sensitive, because we are in critical times. And those of us who have hearts for service, hearts for healing, I find, aside from my child clients, my practice is now almost 50% adults, ministers, nurses, psychologists, social workers, life coaches, social justice advocates, right? So because we are naturally predisposed to having big hearts, to absorb in others' pain, and to want to pour ourselves out for healing, everyone who comes to us feels better, and then we're a depleted puddle on the floor at the end because we've transferred our energy, that energetic exchange. So the thing that I'm understanding is that our well-being and our ability to shore up our strength, to dial our gifts and adjust them with consciousness, to build strong, healthy fields, to build grounded spiritual experiences in balanced physical bodies is absolutely essential. Otherwise, we can't stay in the game long enough to be in the marches, to be in the change, to be in the turbulent times that require our type of heart to make a difference for healing our planet.
Thank you for saying that. That is beautiful.
Yeah, so I know it feels good, and that will be my main message to your audience, and I'm going to look straight at the camera. If you perceive yourself as empathic and intuitive, self-care and doing whatever it takes to understand these tools to really strengthen yourself is essential. It's critical. It's not good enough anymore for us to stay in our homes and to hide out and to check out when things seem overwhelming through the hurricanes, through, you know, threat of war, violence, whatever. We have to commit to our spiritual path of strengthening ourselves and understanding how to use our gifts and not just being scared and hurt. And it is serious, right? The pain that we feel when we're overloaded in our physical body or emotionally, it's real, and it's not to be ignored or minimized in any way. But the passion to have that why behind, why do I have these gifts? How am I meant to serve? What is the unique contribution I can make with my intuitive and empathic gifts? That why will pull us through to developing the tools we need to strengthen ourselves. Now,
for people who are watching right now, because I feel so many people have certain symptoms, as we call them, or we see so many children psychiatrically
Right.
labeled, diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, social anxiety disorder, that disorder, this disorder. And quite often we see it as a disorder, but it's actually high sensitivity or an increased intuitive, empathic ability. How would you say does, or like specifically that high sensitivity express itself? So people who are watching can go like, oh, maybe I'm not ADD or ADHD, or my child doesn't have social behavioral disorder.
Right.
It's actually just high sensitivity.
So I want to start off. I always do this when I'm interviewed and start off by saying I'm not a medical doctor.
Yeah.
I'm a PhD research doctor, but I'll share from my experience what I've seen over the last 15 years of working with children and being a part of a holistic wellness clinic, is that there is often an overlap, and we do see a lot of children and adults who have been labeled with anxiety disorders, behavior disorders, ADHD, and things of that nature, who also are highly sensitive. And so the energy modality that I've developed, called the Innerlight Method, is one that is specifically designed to help empathic and intuitive people self-regulate and we call it a form of therapeutic mindfulness.
Okay.
And so we're able to help connect with the body intuitively and help calm the nervous system and the specific channels in the physical body that relate to being intuitive. And so what we commonly find with empathic and intuitive people, particularly empaths, is a lot of digestive and intestinal issues.
Interesting.
So I would say about 80 to 90% of the clients that I work with have undiagnosed digestion issues, be it constipation, leaky gut, Crohn's, irritable bowel, dysbiosis, and things like that. And so that is always something that typically responds very well to the Innerlight Method therapy, and also has a wellness component that needs to be addressed through diet and through supplements with a holistic practitioner. We see a tremendous amount of anxiety challenges, if you can imagine, because people who are intuitive, they're not just reading presence of possible danger in the physical, they're reading energies in the invisible as well. And the solar plexus is registering that. And because we're constantly open, that energy running through the nervous system is activating the adrenals, the stress, the autonomic nervous system. And so the energy work is also able to help people calm that nervous system. People are able to sleep through the night, to be able to be calm and peaceful in the body. And so again, that has an energy component. So whereas mindfulness practices can help to calm the nervous system and make that shift, we know that magnesium is a huge balancer and resets the human energy field, as well as calming the nervous system.
Amazing.
So we take a lot of Epsom salt baths.
Okay.
You mentioned going to the beach. The ocean has the salts.
Yeah.
So again, we find that highly sensitive people are low on magnesium and the full spectrum of trace minerals.
Wow.
So we burn through them. We also find that people with anxiety, ADHD, autism also have low magnesium, and also challenges with balances in dopamine and serotonin, which a lot of people with mental illness diagnosis, depression and bipolar and other things, are also shown to be off balance with their neurotransmitters. So in our work, we never tell anyone, don't take your medication or don't believe your doctor. But what we do is encourage people to understand the ways that in their diet and in their lifestyle choices, they can be boosting their trace minerals and getting the magnesium, copper, selenium, zinc back in the body. Things that they can be doing or eating that boost serotonin, that boost dopamine. So those are the overlaps that we see. And between the energy therapy and people being proactive in their lifestyle choices, it has been amazing, the number of people that we've seen that have been able to either avoid medication if they started the process before they went that route and then went back to their doctors and found that it wasn't necessary, or people with the help of their practitioners, after seeing the progress that they made with this work, have been able to reduce or go off their medication with the guidance and help of their doctor. We never, the practitioners that I train and we never get involved with making a decision for anyone or telling anyone that they don't need their meds. Because for some people, they absolutely are essential for being able to be balanced.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense because I eat super clean. I'm a vegan. I eat organic, non-GMO food. I don't do any refined sugars.
Oh, you're great.
And I'm really, it's been a process, but I'm getting there. And I like to do my superfood smoothie, and I add trace minerals. I have a really good supplement that I bring from Germany whenever I go back. And then there's times when I get busy and I don't do my superfoods.
And you notice the difference?
I can notice the difference. I don't feel as good. I'm more fatigued, or I'm more sensitive. And then, like today, before I came over, I added like some extra Cal Mag, selenium, my superfoods mix, and I feel so much better.
It is essential. And that's what I talk about when I work with people that say, oh, I just want to open my intuitive gifts. Help me be more intuitive. Help me know more, see more. And I say, well, what would be the value of that? Until we develop the discipline to create a physical body, a vehicle that can handle the charge and the frequency of those higher capacities, right? So what does it profit you to see, hear, know the future and all that if your physical body is so blown out by that you can't get up, pay your bills, feed your children, go to work, enjoy your relationships, make love to your partner, right? And so that self-care piece, it is so essential and fundamental to doing what we call having a balanced spiritual, a grounded spiritual experience in a balanced physical body. They have to go together.
And I think that is the big thing, because I see so many people doing the healing on the physical level, but they're forgetting the body, the spirit and the soul, the emotional aspect. And then vice versa. I see so many people doing the emotional work or the spiritual work, but they're eating junk food. They're eating refined sugars. I'm like, so thank you for saying that. It has to be a combination of all of it.
So what's your favorite superfood? Cacao is mine.
Cacao, yes. Oh my gosh. I've been doing this thing with raw almonds and raw cacao, raw honey and raw cacao nibs and reishi mushrooms.
Oh, you got a
my gosh, it's so good. Like, at night.
So mine is cacao and maca, and we'll make it in we call it chocolate medicine with raw honey and cinnamon and a little bit of cayenne pepper.
So good.
Yes, or put it in a smoothie. But green leafy vegetables, the whole entire list of superfoods, they are essential to the high functioning of those of us who are highly sensitive. And I feel like the children, a lot of parents that I work with, they won't do it for themselves. They won't make the change. But when they see their children suffering, and intuitive children always have intuitive parents that I've in my work. But when the children need the change, then the family will come in and make the changes and do it together. And so it's really beautiful. I feel like this new generation of children that are just coming in so sensitive, so light, so connected, and in their knowing, they're bringing us all along to make the changes we need for our whole society in order to elevate the vibration.
And you just got into something that I find so interesting, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this. These kids that are coming in, it feels like they're so connected and so tuned in. And so many of these kids at a young age are becoming our teachers.
Yes.
Do you see that big theme where these parents have these highly sensitive children, and then they go through their own spiritual awakening because of their child?
And that's exactly what I see. Again, as I mentioned before, so many parents are empathic, intuitive. They will suck up the suffering. They'll have the stomach aches. They'll have the anxiety. They would not invest in having energy work or working with a holistic health practitioner for themselves. But then here comes a child, beautiful baby, young child suffering, not able to thrive in school, not able to make friends or connect. And then they'll come in and they'll spend that same money they would have never invested in themselves for the children. They'll clean out the entire pantry and go to Whole Foods, Sprouts, and redo the whole kitchen for that child, but not for themselves. And it brings the whole family along. It absolutely does.
Now, when you do the energy work with the children, do you also suggest to work, or do you work on the parents themselves?
I will start with children, but because it's in the consciousness of what parents are ready to accept. But we know in quantum physics, there's no time, there's no space. We know in the consciousness space that we're all one. In the cases where parents will let me work with them first, by the time I get to the child, there's like a fraction of the energy work left to do with the child. And we forget how much, especially empathic children, have absorbed for us and from generational line, right? And so what we see when we're helping people clear energy and shift consciousness to be able to have a stronger physical container for their intuitive energy, we hold trapped energy from present life, from prenatal. So think about how many highly sensitive children absorbed their mother's stress for them while they were pregnant with them. And unfortunately in our pregnancies, modern day pregnancies, Many of us, through necessity or whatever, no judgment, work right up until the end of a pregnancy, full work day, full stress load, you know, and there's a chemical reaction, right, in our bodies when we live under that kind of stress, let alone whether if there's any kind of violence or stress within the relationship. Babies are there and they're absorbent and a part of that. And then if people entertain whether past life concepts or generational concepts, these children are still holding the energies from that. And then the collective consciousness. So it's all these levels of clearing. And when we start that work with the parent first, there's very little to do with the child at the end.
That's amazing. Yeah. You talked about something earlier, and I want to circle back to that.
Absolutely.
You said if we can learn how to strengthen our energy field so we can stay intuitive, it's going to filter in so many other areas.
Right.
And I also read, you wrote something, I don't know if it was on the website or one of the videos I watched, where you talked about, you know, like each single child has such unique gifts. And unfortunately, I mean, I found that even with myself, because I was such a highly sensitive child, even before I moved to LA and had that big awakening, that I had to shut down my gifts in order to function in the world.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So that is what I love about the invitation that I received at the beginning of this year to help build the Center for Neurodiversity, Learning and Wellness at the University of La Verne in California. Yay. We are sitting in this beautiful intersection, and this is my interest as a clinical professor. What is this overlap between genius, creativity, mysticism, and mental illness and intuitive pathways? And so Einstein is like my poster child for this concept because he gives me such an amazing entry point to have conversations about these highly intuitive, highly sensitive children in academic settings that value the science, the logic, right? So any quote you read about Einstein, he will consistently say, intuition is more valuable than knowledge.
Yes.
I'm no more intelligent than others. I just sit with the problems longer, right? He had active pathways that he used to engage his intuitive faculties when he was stuck with a problem. So he would ride his bike, he would play his violin, he would take a bath, he would take a nap. All of those are pathways that allow us to access the intuitive realms. And then we also see when there are extreme levels of genius, creativity, mysticism, that within those families, there's also a higher rate of mental illness, of bipolar, schizophrenia, those kind of things. And so this work is really beautiful because we want to say, shut it down. I don't want to be in my gift. I just want to be normal. But when we're in that gift is where we find our genius contribution to society. And so it's really interesting. I've been doing work understanding the role of dopamine in learning and in accessing mystical and intuitive genius states. And there's a very fine line. When dopamine is super low, we have depression, apathy, this sense of purposelessness, right? And ADHD, Parkinson's disease, there are certain medical conditions that are known to be in the low dopamine range. Then when we get in the ideal dopamine range, we need it for learning, for focus, attention, to feel motivated, to chase goals. But then when we go into this genius zone, there's a little bit higher dopamine range we can access, right? Through meditation, through the foods we eat, through different points of consciousness. And that genius zone is where we want to live with Einstein, where he could dream, have visual intuition, theory of relativity, other things, but then not go over the edge with so much dopamine that we end up in the schizophrenia, mania, anxiety, mental illness range. And it's a very fine line. And so what I'm experimenting with, we like to say we experiment with consciousness in this work, is it possible for us to become intentional about moderating that zone so that we can get in it, to get those genius intuitive breakthroughs and insights, but then not go over the edge into the mental illness or the intuitive overload, but bring it back down into the optimal zone where we can actually follow through, set goals, activate them, accomplish them, and bring it into the tangible material realm. Because there's so many of us that love being in those exalted states of expanded consciousness, but then when it's time to come down from that and chop wood and carry water, it's really hard for people. And so we say, oh, I love living in my meditation zone. I love living in the expanded zone. It just feels so good. It feels so bliss. But we don't want to keep floating up into that disconnect that leads us into, concerns about mental well-being. Yeah. We want to anchor it down in a balanced physical body where we can get it somewhere, because the world is waiting for us who are empathic and intuitive to bring our genius inventions, to bring our solutions, to bring our new ways of seeing things and anchor them down and actualize them in the world, right?
I have full body chills as you're saying that. I'm like, woo, amazing.
So that's what we're playing with. What are the things that we do with wellness? What are the things we need to do with our learning? What are the different lenses we need to see neurodiversity? So what are the different ways we need to look at someone with ADHD? What are the different ways we need to look at someone with autism, with dyslexia, and see the genius first, rather than looking at them and seeing a disorder? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So if all we do is look and see you're disordered, diseased, dysfunctional, we're disrespecting the genius. Yeah. And in our center, we're just trying to flip that whole thing and say, yeah, your brain functions in a way that predisposes you to have a difficult time with socializing or with focusing. But what are the strategies through mindfulness, through harnessing your intuitive gifts, through having a more superfood diet, through creating light, color, sound in the environment to allow us to be able to function at our optimal levels. So that's what we're playing with at the Center for Neurodiversity.
I love that.
Because we need Einstein out of everybody. We don't need to just say, oh, there was just those people that are genius and that's not us. But if we all awaken our gifts and regulate them and anchor them, we can all find our way of shining our unique genius contribution on the planet.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for doing the work.
Absolutely. We're in it. And I'm really honored that the University of La Verne and there are other universities that are having mindfulness think tanks and places where consciousness is being studied. But for a university to openly say, yes, we're willing to look holistically at how we can shift the conversation in education and really have direct conversations about consciousness and how we can modulate that is just it's
incredible.
And we have amazing. Great professors in the Lafayette College of Education, many who have their own meditation practices, their mindfulness practices. The co-director, Patricia Taylor, who invited me to be a part of this with her. She has a PhD in depth psychology, so she brings the spirituality and psychology to how she runs special education. Amazing. So we are really trying as a college at the University of La Verne to see the soul of the child, the spirit of the learner before the diagnosis. And I think that is something that really sets us apart and makes us unique from what other colleges of education are doing to train teachers and social workers and school psychologists. So we're preparing the professionals who will see these indigo and rainbow and beautiful light children from a completely different perspective, and they will not see the pathology first by the time we get through training them.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you, University of La Verne. Yay! And there is something that you talked about, and I just want to circle back. You call them, and I wrote it down here, the intuitive pathways. Could you explain to us what intuitive pathways are? Because I'm like, this sounds amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. So back to your original point that everyone is intuitive. I absolutely agree with you that we all are intuitive, but not all of us are intuitive at such a high level that it interferes with our ability to function well in our daily life. And so for me, growing up, I was always familiar with, let's say, a clairvoyant or a visual intuitive, right? Someone who can see. I don't see auras. I don't see anything with my eyes open, but with my eyes closed, I see gray as if it's playing on a movie screen behind my eyelids, right? So there's open eye visual, closed-eyed visual. So I was familiar with that, but I didn't realize until later that there were other ways that we could access intuitive information and insight to the non-physical realm. So just like we have 5 senses that allow us to see and feel, hear, touch, we have the intuitive range of those same senses that allow us. So and I use the word visual intuitive instead of the clairs because they work better in school environments where we do the work. So we have visual intuition, either open eye or closed. We have auditory intuition. And so that could be people who are more on the telepathic range or people who hear beautifully composed music in their mind's ear and are able to compose. For me, I hear what to say inside my inner mind, and I try to keep up with what that inner voice is saying. Then we have kinesthetic intuition, which is how, in the school setting, how we refer to empathy. So people who get intuitive messages by feelings in their body. So if I feel a headache, it might give me an indication that my client is having a headache. And then there is the olfactory intuition, which I was not aware of until I started doing this work. People who get intuitive messages through smell. Pretty awesome.
I had no idea about
Then
that.
we have gustatory intuition, people who get intuitive messages through tasting things that are not actually in their mouth. And it will be messages. So for example, I have someone that I work with in the healing arts. When she tastes heavy metal in her mouth, that's an indication to her that the client she is working with has heavy metal toxicity. And so when she has that taste, she will go to her testing kit and test that client to find out what kind of heavy metal toxicity is going on. So for example, with olfactory, people who might smell, if there's no roses in this room, but someone might smell rose, and that is an intuitive message about Grandma Rose. Or they might smell fire when there's no fire, and giving them an intuitive message that something was left on at home.
Yeah.
So so those are the primary. And then we have the mental intuitives. And those are my children who get in a lot of trouble at school. Because our mental intuitives can intuit the answers to very complex problems, let's say math, without even writing it down.
Oh my goodness.
And then the teacher says, well, yeah, Sally, that's the right answer, but how'd you get it? You didn't show the work.
Yeah.
Well, is it right? Yeah. Well, then I need to see your work. Well, but if it's right, why do I need to show the work? Because I need to know you didn't cheat, right?
Yeah. And these kids don't know these things. They're like, I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
I actually interviewed a teenager for our documentary series, The Children of the Rainbow, and he would look at the math question and he would be able to write down the answer without going the steps in between, and he would constantly get into trouble with the teacher saying you cheated, and then his parents had to sit down conversation with him. It's like, this is how the system works, you just need to show the teacher that you did all these steps.
But it's difficult for them, and they're burnt out with school because, you know, so, but it's just interesting that everyone has a pathway that we're strongest in, right? But, and some many more than one. Some maybe we call multisensory intuitives if they are able to access intuitive information and guidance through multiple pathways. But I think it's important that we all learn which intuitive faculties are strongest in us so that we can develop those because they are the access points to our genius potential.
Interesting.
So we won't do the genius thing that Einstein did, just staying in the logical mind of what's already known about the world, right?
Yeah.
The intuitive pathways give us the bridge into the unknown and let us pull that new next level knowledge down and anchor it back in today's knowing.
Yeah. That is so beautiful.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
I also love how, you know, looking at how our school system is set up, that is so training our logical mind all the time instead of the intuitive mind, but it's the intuitive mind that is bringing in, like you just said, that is bringing in the information.
The intuitive mind brings in the genius. And then the logical mind just packages it in a way that the current minds can understand it so that everyone can raise up in consciousness and move on to the next level of possibility for evolution.
Yeah, and hopefully we're going to get there, especially with all the new research that's being done. Or even I've been seeing studies done, mindfulness in schools, meditation schools, and how the violence rate has gone down and the concentration rate has gone up, and how the grades have gone up by just introducing mindfulness in school or having kids meditate. So hopefully there's more and more schools that are going into that direction of introducing the mindfulness or teaching about intuitive pathways.
Yeah, and that's why one of the core features of the Center for Neurodiversity, Learning and Wellness at the University of La Verne, mindfulness instruction is core. And so not only are we designing mindfulness training for children and learners all the way through college age with autism, ADHD, dyslexia to teach them those tools, but we're also we will be offering our first mindfulness retreat next July.
Amazing.
For teachers and psychologists and social workers, for those in the schools, not just so they can go and give it to the children, but so that they can be mindfully present in how they show up. But you're absolutely right. When I attend research conferences now, there's a Learning in the Brain Institute. Last year's conference was all about research evidence on mindfulness.
Wow.
Even on how meditation practice changes gray matter in the brain. I mean, there is a lot of work that's being done, and we are bringing it forward in the university and training the teachers in our teacher training program as we roll it out this year and next year. Everyone who comes through to learn teacher education will have a mindfulness component to take into their toolkit as teachers.
Now, until we get there, I feel like, you know, we're set at such a bridging point where we're like, yes, the information is there, the research is being done, but it's a very slow process, and hopefully that process is going to be sped up.
It is
introducing
it
into the schools.
Yes.
Now, let's say we have parents watching that who have these highly intuitive children or highly empathic children. What are some of the things they could do for that child outside of school that would support these beautiful gifts?
Thank you. So mindfulness is number one. There are so many great apps and videos and things where parents can actually have a mindfulness practice with their children, and they can be short. There's one that I really like. It's called the 60-second fix, right?
Okay.
You cannot get faster than 60 seconds.
Don't
tell me you don't have time for 60 seconds. But there's a school psychologist named Reggie Morris, Dr. Reggie Melrose.
Okay.
And her book is called The 60-Second Fix. And I find great success. I've worked with that all the way up to law school students with the 60-second fix. But any kind of mindfulness practice that would work. One thing I invite parents of highly sensitive children to consider is something that I call environmental energetics. Fluorescent lights really strain highly sensitive children, right? Sharp colors, clutter. There's a lot of things in the environment and that need to be considered. And so one thing I could invite parents to do is Google interior space design for children with autism. Not that your child has autism. However, what I have found as we research and are designing the center is that design elements that work well for calming, soothing, and helping people on the autism spectrum self-regulate are the same qualities of interior design space that serve all highly sensitive and intuitive people that I work with. So there are color palettes that are preferred by the autistic eye. There are space arrangements, and I think looking at that and changing the colors of rooms, minimizing like patterns, those things can also support self-regulation. I would encourage everyone to purchase my book, I Feel Your Pain.
It's amazing.
Thank you. And in that book, I dedicate 2 whole chapters to exercises that parents can do to teach their children to dial their intuitive gifts up and down. It's very important to instill a sense of self-agency, self-efficacy, and self-advocacy in children, to not always say, let's go see this therapist or this person is going to fix you and make you better, but saying, when I'm in this environment, I feel, and these are the tools that help me feel better, so they can employ those techniques. I think it's important for parents of highly sensitive children to understand that nothing's wrong with their child if they don't enjoy Disneyland or Chuck E. Cheese or some of the other high stimulating places that typical children can handle, and find calmer, more relaxing ways as a family to enjoy time, so that it's not always a focus on the highly sensitive child about being too sensitive, always being the one having the meltdown and always being the one needing to leave. Again, Epsom salt baths are very important. And essential oils. Yes, are very calming and soothing. Kundalini yoga.
Yes.
Saved my life. I love all kinds of yoga. I love Bikram. I love many, but Kundalini yoga is the best style of yoga that I have found that helps highly intuitive and empathic people move energy, reset the nervous system, and bring in the breath work that helps us clear our electromagnetic field when we felt like we've absorbed other people's energy. So please find your local Kundalini yoga studio and get a yoga class for children going.
That's actually my favorite yoga, and I've done everything from no, I cannot even say.
Is it
Ashtanga yoga to Hatha yoga. My uncle is actually a yoga teacher. And when I came across Kundalini, I'm like, that's it.
Don't you feel your whole pathway and your whole brain, everything?
Yeah, everything. I feel so amazing. And when I had the most stressful day, I'm like, where's my Kundalini yoga? And I have I love Guru Singh from Yoga West. That was my first yoga teacher in Kundalini yoga. He's amazing. And he has some of his classes online. I'm like, where's my yoga classes online? I need to do some Kundalini. And just 15 minutes sometimes even, or half an hour of that breath work and the movement. I feel like all that stress is falling off of me.
And any kind of Kundalini solar plexus exercises that twist, we call them the washing machine when we're doing yoga with children, because it helps reset the solar plexus and clear that overload of empathic energy from the solar plexus.
Interesting.
Love. And there's a Kundalini yoga book called Fly Like a Butterfly. I think it's Shakti Khalsa. And it has a book full of Kundalini exercises that parents could do at home with their children if they don't live in a community that has that kind of yoga practice. But yeah, those are the core things. And then with the Innerlight Method, the energy work that we do, as we know, consciousness is not bound by time or place. So whether clients are physically in the room with a practitioner or whether they are at home and we are able to do it virtually over a Zoom so we can see each other through video, the energy work does help reset the nervous system, kind of dial down. We have practices that we're able to teach to turn the volume down on the intuitive gifts. People are able to sleep through the night for the first time in some cases and really learn the tools of self-regulating. But remember, consciousness moves energy. So as we become consciously aware and focus our awareness on how we want to move our state of being, we really have the power to be our own self-healer.
I love that. And that's a beautiful line. I'm just getting the 2 minutes over here. We have to wrap it up. I could talk to you for another hour because it's just like such incredible information. Absolutely. So hopefully people are going to find you and read your books. And I'm just excited about the research you're going to be doing or have started to do.
Yes, we'll keep you posted when we have findings and reports. Because we really want people to understand that our goal at the University of La Verne is to create this bridge of science and spirituality. And there are a lot of universities that are on similar pathways, but we are one of the only ones right now that are looking directly into how energy, consciousness, intuition feeds directly into learning disabilities or learning labels and how it can go directly into schools in a secular way. That kind of breaks up all this conversation of it being new agey or religious. Because we understand that meditation practices work, mindfulness practices work, consciousness practices work without any religious or other kind of connotations. So we are able to have a very informed secular conversation about this work and how we can make ourselves get to that next level of consciousness where we touch our genius.
I love it.
Thank you.
And tell our audience where they can find you, please.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So for my private practice, we have what we call a virtual village where we have group energy balancing sessions, book clubs that people from all around the world can participate in. And so you can find our virtual village at innerlightsanctuary.com. And at the end of October, we'll be having our open house for the Center for Neurodiversity Learning and Wellness. So you can also find me at the Lafayette College of Education at the University of La Verne. And through the website for the University of La Verne, you can find the Center for Neurodiversity Learning and Wellness and stay abreast of all the work that we're doing. So I'm really thrilled. The university has invited me to bring the energy healing therapy modality, Innerlight Method, a form of therapeutic mindfulness, and we'll be training teachers, social workers, school psychologists how to practice energy work with children through the university. And I can tell you nobody else is doing that.
Yay! Oh my gosh.
So stay tuned and join and participate and help us spread the word. Thank you so much for the opportunity to brag about all the things we're doing.
I'm just excited that you're doing it. And it's such, honestly, we need more people like you who are going out into the world and creating these incredible changes, because I believe that children are our future.
They are.
And we can change the world by changing the way we raise these kids.
And thank you for the documentary and everything you're doing to help people understand that what they were experiencing is real. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today. It was such an honor to talk with you and have you share all your amazing, incredible knowledge. Thank you,
Kristie.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And Rebel Hearts, that's it for today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you want to support us, go to iTunes, go to the Rebel Hearts with Kristie Reeves podcast, and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Tell us what you think about this show. Listen to some of the other ones. We have incredible information out there. Any kind of person we bring on to Rebel Hearts is really here to inspire you, empower you, and motivate you to become the change that you want to see in the world. So support us with your reviews, because it's going to help us to bring more amazing guests onto the show. And we will see you next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. And remember, in the meantime, to rebel on.
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.